You are now listening to 1-900 Old Ladies, The Lost Art of Making Lefse, written by L. Lee Starr, narrated by the author. Post-production by Pinto Media. Chapter 26. Marge Carter hurriedly whizzed past the reception counter of the Himmel County jailhouse. She dressed in a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. She wore no makeup, and her hair was scrunched up with a banana clip. She carried a plastic Ziploc baggie in her hand. "I have urgent business with the sheriff," she quickly informed the dispatcher. "I've only got a couple of minutes before Ellie gets back." She made her way to Paul Baker's office. Paul stood to greet her. "Hi, Marge. What brings you here today?" "I haven't got time for small talk, Paul. I only have a few minutes before Ellie gets back. I have to stop by Larson's grocer on the way home and pick up some cough drops," Margie snapped. "In that case, what can I do for you today?" the sheriff inquired. "Here's that disgusting lock of grandmother's hair." She handed him the clear Ziploc bag with Ellie's recovered tuft of Sigrid's locks. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to sneak around in Ellie's room with that woman still in the house? My sister watches me like a friggin' hawk." Paul examined the item which Margie had delivered to him. "I can't thank you enough, Marge. I'm much obliged." "Sure, Paul. So now what?" Margie asked, resting her hands on her hips. "I send this to the crime lab, and we wait," he answered. "Wait, are you serious? How long will that take?" 2, maybe 4 weeks, tops." 4 weeks? I haven't got 4 weeks." Marge was clearly upset. Paul lifted his hand to quiet Marge. His deliberate manner seemed to have a calming effect on her. "Relax, Marge." He sat down at his desk. "Jim McDaniel has agreed to delay his report until this toxicology report comes back. In the meantime, I will try to expedite matters." "I get it. Then what?" Margie asked. "If the hair analysis shows that Sigrid was poisoned, we have probable cause to search the house and exhume the body. And we send it off to Jim. But you need to make sure that you don't get rid of that box of rat poison," Paul stated. "But grandmother's been dead for 25 years. Isn't it a bit late to be digging her up?" "What's left of her?" "Skeletal remains, hair, teeth, and nails. People have been known to dig up corpses 100 years old to see if they've been arsenic poisoned. There's no statute of limitations for murder in North Dakota. I'm surprised that the Himmel sheriff didn't do this back in '67. I suppose Stanley wasn't a suspect back then. Anyways, we wait. That's all we can do." "And if you don't find anything?" Margie asked worriedly. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there. You needn't fret over that now, Marge. Why don't you head over to Larson's real quick? You do sound a bit hoarse. Are you coming down with something?" Paul probed. "No, Paul. Just a lot of talking on the phone," she stated ambiguously. "I'll bet." The sheriff winked at Marge mischievously. "A lot of people looking to make Lefse these days, eh?" "Yes, Paul. A lot of hungry, lonely, creepy guys." Margie stood at the checkout counter of Larson's Grocer and Drug. She pushed 10 boxes of chloroseptic throat lozenges over to Agnes. Agnes frowned. "Sore throat?" Marge responded sarcastically. "How'd you guess?" Then she added apologetically, "Sorry, Agnes. I didn't mean to be fresh, but my throat is sore. I've been talking nonstop, and now I'm hoarse." "You mean on the 900 line?" "Yeah, everybody wants a piece of Ellie's Lefse recipe." "Oh," Agnes stated surprised. "I thought you and Ellie had a sexy chat line." Now Margie was surprised. She thought she and Ellie had done a good job of keeping the nature of the 900 line a secret. "Well, it is," she affirmed. "But Ellie doesn't want people in the town to know that." "Oh, too late for that, hon. Everybody in the town knows about it. Not too many secrets around here. Really? Oh, yeah, sure. If it weren't for gossip in Himmel, people wouldn't have anything to talk about. I see, Margie stated curiously. Agnes's face lit up as she tried to change the subject. Say, Bill has this fabulous cough syrup you might be able to use. Let's see if he can fix you up. Marge followed Agnes to Bill's pharmacy window, located in the rear of the grocery store. The pharmacy appeared empty. Agnes called for her husband, who popped his head out from behind a supply shelf in the back. Hon, Margie needs some of your miracle throat cure. Oh, sure. Too much talking on the phone, Marge? He pointed to his throat. Marge nodded. Agnes seems to think you can fix me up. Bill answered, Oh, you betcha. Usually it's prescription only, but for Ellie's sister, I can make an exception. He assembled the necessary tools to compound Marge's cough syrup as he spoke. 1 spoonful of this elixir, and it'll knock that laryngitis right on its backside. Just give me a sec. He pulled an empty glass cough syrup bottle off the shelf. Agnes stood in front of the druggist's window to keep Margie company while she waited for Bill to prepare this concoction. Sales were slow this time of day. There wasn't anyone in the store except for Marge, Agnes, and Bill. So, Agnes, Marge inquired curiously, what else do you know? What do you mean, Marge? I suppose you owning this drugstore and all. You knew Stan's wife, Rosa, was pregnant? Bill stopped his stirring for a moment and raised his head. We're not supposed to talk about that stuff, Marge. Patient confidentiality. Agnes chimed in. We sort of suspected when she came in last week to buy the EPT test. Margie responded thoughtfully. And I suppose you knew that Stanley was not Stan Jr.'s father. Oh, yeah. We suspected that from the beginning. Stan Jr. was born the same time my oldest son, Andrew, was born, Agnes answered. Well, naturally, we just assumed he might belong to Robert, Agnes replied. Marge found herself amused by the fact that Agnes seemed to know more about Marge's family than Marge seemed to. She decided to test Agnes. So tell me, Agnes, did you think that Stanley poisoned grandmother? Oh, no, hon. That took us by surprise. If that's true, Mrs. Olstad will be glad to know that. Why would Mrs. Olstad be glad about Stanley poisoning grandmother? Marge asked, a bit puzzled. Now everyone can start eating her lutefisk again. Nobody ate it after your grandmother died. Poor Mrs. Olstad. She really loved to make lutefisk. She got a bad rap for that one, don't you know? I'm sure she did. Now, tell me, Agnes, did you hear that Ellie probably killed Stanley? Bill chimed in as he affixed a label to Marge's brown syrup bottle. I don't see why she didn't do him in sooner. Agnes scolded Bill. Now, Bill. She turned to Marge. It's just that everybody loves Ellie, Marge. You certainly can't fault her for taking matters into her own hands. Marge agreed with Agnes as she dug for more information. Nope, can't blame my sister a bit. You're right. But did you know he was frozen out in the barn all winter? No, the auction was the first time we'd heard about that, Agnes replied. Margie paused for a moment. She thoughtfully furrowed her brow. So what about me, Agnes? What about you, Marge? Agnes looked a little puzzled. You know, what have you heard about me? Anything? In a perverted way, Marge relished the idea of being the subject of small-town gossip. It was much better than being a forgotten nobody. She would much prefer being hated by every green-eyed woman in the town than to be invisible. Margie reasoned that if she were the subject of town gossip, that would mean that at least someone in the town perceived her as interesting enough to spread rumors about. But Marge was discovering during her cross-examination of Agnes Larson that all Agnes's gossip was, indeed, true. Agnes squirmed around uncomfortably. as Margie posed the question to her again. I'm serious, Agnes. What have you heard about me? You can say it. You know I'm not embarrassed by anything. I don't care what people think of me. Agnes blushed. You mean the bit about you and Jim McDaniel, the medical examiner in Bismarck? Oh gosh, Marge, you can't believe everything you hear. Sure you can. What did you hear? She probed. Oh, that you slept with him to tell you about Stanley's autopsy? Yeah, that one. You don't think I might do some fool thing like that? Margie asked amusedly. Bill stepped out in front of the window and handed Marge her cough syrup. Here you go. Special for Marge Carter. Oh, I get it, Marge commented. You're just dancing around the topic because you don't think Jim McDaniel would pick me up at a bar and make wild, passionate love to me. Nonsense, Marge. I didn't say that. Agnes shook her head. You could pick me up at a bar any day, Marge, Bill remarked. Agnes slapped Bill on the arm. She again scolded him. You need to watch yourself, Bill Larson. I'll not have you harassing the customers. Bill rubbed his sore arm. I'm just saying, Marge is an attractive woman. Why wouldn't I pick her up at a bar? He backpedaled a bit. I mean, if I didn't have a sweet, wonderful woman already waiting for me at home. Agnes glared at her husband as he responded defensively. What? I'm old, but I'm not dead, woman. Margie smiled, waving her newly made bottle of miracle elixir. Thanks, Bill. She kissed him affectionately on the cheek. Really, Bill, I mean it. Thanks a lot. I needed that. She winked at him flirtatiously as she turned to leave. Agnes again glared at her spouse. Marge exited Larson's grocer and was encouraged by the sound of Agnes and Bill Larson arguing about her. Bill tried unsuccessfully to defend himself from his jealous wife's wrath. Don't you be encouraging Marge now, she snapped. What? Can I look? I said I'm sorry. You better be sorry. Be careful, Bill Larson. You might lose that wandering eye. Marge closed the shop door behind her as she whispered to herself, I may be an old lady, but I still got it. It had been 2 weeks since Marge Carter delivered her grandmother's lock of hair to Sheriff Baker's office. Marge sat at the kitchen table of the old farmhouse, speaking to a caller on the 900 line. When she heard a knock on the kitchen door, she called to Ellie. She held her palm over the receiver. Answer the door, would you, Ellie? And don't let them in. I'm on the phone. Ellie did as she was instructed, but when she answered the door, Sheriff Paul Baker and 3 police officers stood on the porch. Good morning, Miss Sievertson, Paul greeted. May we come in? Ellie hesitantly let them in. Sure, Paul. What brings you here? Gosh, this looks like official business. She looked worried. He removed his hat, stepped in, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm afraid it is, Miss Sievertson. I have a search warrant for your property, he announced. Marge spoke into the phone receiver. I'm going to have to call you back. Somebody's here. Okay, then. You call me back. I said that I can't talk right now. She abruptly hung up the phone. Paul looked over at Marge. Marge, you don't have to hang up on my account. I won't be long. Can I ask you what you're looking for? Marge inquired. Miss Sievertson? Marge. We have reason to believe your grandmother was poisoned, Paul stated. You mean Grandmother Sigrid? Ellie asked. Yes, ma'am, Paul replied. We have reason to believe that your late husband Stanley may have poisoned her to death. He nodded to his 2 deputies, who each donned latex gloves and started searching the kitchen cupboards. He nodded to the 3rd deputy. Brad, search the upstairs. Ellen was shaken. Marge put her arm around her sister's shoulder to offer her support. I don't think I understand, Paul. What makes you think Stanley poisoned grandmother? Inquired Ellen. Paul retrieved Stanley's book, The Pale Horse, from his vest pocket and offered his explanation. Doris purchased this book belonging to Stanley at the auction 3 weeks ago. Do you recognize this book? Yeah, it's one of Stanley's books, she replied. He opened the book to reveal the writing scrawled on the back inside cover. And do you recognize this handwriting? Oh, yeah, it's Stanley's for sure, Paul. Can you read what it says, Miss Sievertson? It looks like it says, Yum, yum, rat fiddles, lutefisk. Oh, goodness, Stanley never was a good speller. Kills a Norway rat. Ellen looked at Paul, puzzled. One of the Himmel deputies opened the cabinet beneath the kitchen sink. He knelt down and retrieved the box of rat poison. He called out to Paul, Sheriff, I found it. Paul Baker took the box from his deputy. He read the box aloud. Yum, yum, rat victuals. He studied the package of the rat poison. The packaging and the name seemed ironically harmless. Depicted on the front of the box were 2 cuddly and lovable rats, seated at a meal with knife and fork in hand and napkins tied around their necks. To the right of the dining rodents was one dead rodent, sprawled out with his eyes X'd out. Paul read the chemical ingredients of the box of 25-year-old rodenticide. Active ingredient, thallium. He held the box up to Ellie. Miss Sievertson, how long ago did you purchase this box of rat poison? Ellen stared at the box blankly. Why, I didn't purchase it, Paul. Stanley bought that box years ago when we were first married, she replied. He said he had to kill a Norway rat, hiding out here in the kitchen. And did you ever see this rat? Paul inquired. Why, no. Do you know what this reference to lutefisk is all about, Miss Sievertson? Paul asked. I don't know, Paul. He did have Mrs. Olstad make lutefisk for my grandmother. He took care of her when she died. I see. Have you had any since your grandmother passed? Oh, no. He threw all the pots and pans away and forbade it from being in the house, Ellen responded. One final question, Miss Sievertson. Did Stanley have a reason to kill your grandmother? She never really did like Stanley. She wanted me to divorce him after Stan Jr. was born. But Stanley was always so good to her. I'm not sure why he'd want to kill her if he liked her so much. What would have happened to Stanley if you divorced him all those years ago, like your grandmother wanted? Paul asked. I don't think Stanley would have had anywhere to go. He had no home and no job. He was disabled because of his war injury. Robert's mother had divorced him years before. I suppose he would have been out in his ear. Just then, the deputy, rummaging under the sink, pulled out another item of interest. Ellie's bloody screwdriver. Sheriff, he yelled. Paul shook his head at the deputy and motioned for him to put the screwdriver back under the sink. Perplexed, the deputy shrugged his shoulders and did as he was instructed. Well, Miss Sievertson, your sister was kind enough to be concerned about your grandmother when I showed her this book. She gave me your grandmother's lock of hair. I'm sorry to say that we tested it and it came up positive for thallium poisoning. Ellen turned pale. Oh, my goodness. Yes, ma'am. I'm afraid we have enough evidence here to start an official investigation into the death of your grandmother. I suspect that your late husband may have poisoned your grandmother's lutefisk with this box of rat poison, and we need to have the coroner confirm whether or not that's true. We're going to have to get permission to exhume her body. Will you sign for that? Marge nodded to her sister. Yes, Paul, we will sign whatever you need us to sign. She hugged her younger sister, who was clearly in shock about the whole ordeal. Paul patted Ellie on the shoulder. I'm sorry to have to break this sad news to you about your grandmother, ladies. I'll get Margie to come down to the station to sign the papers. Marge agreed. Just let me know when. She suspiciously bit her lip. Actually, the sooner the better. I seem to be running out of time. He lifted his hat to the Sievertson sisters. I want to thank you for your time, ladies. Feel free to get back to your 900 chatting. After the sheriff and his deputies left, Ellen stood in the kitchen, shaking. Margie again tried to comfort her. Goodness, Marge. I can't believe that Stanley would kill grandmother, Ellen stated in disbelief. Margie hugged her sister once more. I know it's hard to believe, Ellie, but think about it. Have you ever known Stanley to be nice to anyone? Right there, you gotta know. If he was nice to grandmother, he had to have something up his sleeve.